Love doesn't die, it's just betrayed.
The silence in our Honda Civic was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife and serve it at a funeral. My wife Sarah sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed like a prison guard, staring out the window at the passing streetlights of our dying Midwestern town. The radio played some generic pop song, but neither of us bothered to change it. We were too busy marinating in our mutual hatred. "You know what your problem is, Dave?" Sarah finally said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension usually reserved for explaining algebra to a golden retriever. "You never support Tommy's decisions. The kid wants to quit basketball, and you act like he's announcing he's joining a cult." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles going white. "The kid was good, Sarah, really good. College scouts were looking at him, but sure, let's throw it all away so he can spend more time playing video games in his room. Maybe if you weren't such a control freak, he'd actually want to talk to you about his feelings instead of hiding from you." Control freak. Right. Because wanting your 17-year-old son to not waste his natural athletic talent made me Hitler. I owned a small auto repair shop on the bad side of town, worked 60-hour weeks to keep food on our table and a roof over our heads, and apparently, that made me the villain in Sarah's little drama. "We're here," I said, pulling into the driveway of the Morrison house. The place was lit up like a Christmas tree, with cars parked all along the street. Through the windows, I could see people laughing, drinking, having the kind of fun that seemed to exist in a parallel universe from my marriage. Sarah checked her makeup in the visor mirror, applying another layer of lipstick with surgical precision. She'd dressed up tonight. Black dress that hugged her curves, heels that made her legs look like they went on for miles. For a brief moment, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her 15 years ago. Then she opened her mouth. "Try not to embarrass me tonight, okay? These are important people from my company." Important people. Sarah worked in human resources at Morrison Industries, the biggest employer in our little town. She'd been climbing the corporate ladder for the past 5 years, ever since she decided being married to a mechanic wasn't quite prestigious enough for her tastes. We walked up to the front door, and I could already hear the party in full swing. Sarah immediately plastered on her fake corporate smile, the one she practiced in the bathroom mirror every morning. The door opened before we could knock. "Sarah? Dave, so glad you could make it." Janet Morrison, the boss's wife, greeted us with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for lottery winners. She was one of those women who'd clearly had work done, everything lifted, tucked, and enhanced to fight the inevitable march of time. "Thanks for having us," I said, forcing a smile that felt like chewing glass. The house was exactly what you'd expect from the town's most successful family. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and enough square footage to house a small village. Sarah immediately gravitated toward her work friends, leaving me standing by the door like a coat rack. I made my way to the kitchen, hoping to find something stronger than beer. The place was packed with Sarah's colleagues, all dressed in their weekend casual clothes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I recognized most of them from various company events, the kind of people who said things like circle back and synergy without irony. "Dave," a voice called out behind me. I turned to see Lena Kowalski, Sarah's best friend and fellow HR drone. Lena was one of those women who'd never met a piece of gossip she didn't like, with a smile that could cut glass and eyes that missed nothing. "Hey, Lena, hell of a party." "Oh, you know Janet, she loves going all out." Lena's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Sarah looks amazing tonight, doesn't she? That dress is just stunning on her." I glanced across the room where Sarah was laughing at something one of her male colleagues had said. The guy was tall, dark-haired, and had the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to worry about making rent. "Yeah, she looks great," I said, taking a long pull from my beer. "You're so lucky to have her," Lena continued, her voice taking on that fake sweetness that women use when they're about to stick a knife between your ribs. "I mean, a woman like Sarah could have any man she wanted, but she chose you. That must feel pretty special." There it was, the subtle reminder that I was punching above my weight class, that Sarah was doing me a favor by staying married to me. I'd heard variations of this speech from Lena for years, always delivered with that innocent smile that fooled absolutely no one. "Excuse me," I said, pushing past her toward the living room. The party was in full swing now. Someone had turned up the music and people were starting to dance. I found a corner where I could observe without being observed, nursing my beer and watching my wife work the room like a politician at a campaign rally. That's when I noticed him. He was dancing with Sarah, his hands on her waist, pulling her closer than was strictly appropriate for a married woman at a company party. He was younger than me, probably early 30s, with the kind of rugged good looks that belonged in a cologne commercial. I'd never seen him before, which was unusual in a town this small. "That's Andre," a voice said beside me. I turned to see Bob Peterson, our nosy neighbor, holding a whiskey and grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "He drives taxi downtown, just moved here from Chicago a few months ago." A taxi driver. Sarah was grinding against a taxi driver, while her husband stood in the corner, like a potted plant. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Seems friendly," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Oh, he's friendly, all right. Real popular with the ladies, if you know what I mean." Bob's grin widened. "Course, I'm sure it's just innocent fun. Sarah's a good girl." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Bob was one of those neighbors who knew everyone's business and made it his personal mission to spread it around town like fertilizer. If he was commenting on Sarah's behavior, half the town probably already knew about it. I watched as Andre whispered something in Sarah's ear, making her throw her head back and laugh. Her hand rested on his chest, her fingers playing with the buttons of his shirt. They looked like lovers, not strangers who'd just met at a party. The song ended, but they didn't separate. Instead, Andre led Sarah toward the back patio, his hand on the small of her back. I started to follow, but Lena appeared in front of me like a bad rash. "Dave, there you are. I've been looking all over for you." She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Come meet some of Sarah's new colleagues. They're dying to hear about your little garage." Little garage. The way she said it made it sound like I sold lemonade on street corners. "Maybe later, Lena. I was just going to check on Sarah." "Oh, she's fine. She's just getting some fresh air with Andre. You know how stuffy these parties can get?" Her grip on my arm tightened. "Besides, you don't want to be one of those husbands who follows his wife around like a lost puppy, do you?" The message was clear. Stay put, shut up, and let Sarah have her fun. I looked toward the patio doors, but they were closed, and I couldn't see anything through the glass. For the next hour, I made small talk with people who looked at me like I was an interesting museum exhibit, the blue-collar husband of their rising star colleague. They asked polite questions about my business, nodded at appropriate intervals, and probably forgot my name before I finished speaking. Sarah and Andre returned from the patio around 10 o'clock, both looking flushed and slightly disheveled. Sarah's lipstick was gone, and there was grass stain on the back of her dress. Andre had that satisfied smirk men get when they've just scored a touchdown. "There's my husband," Sarah announced, stumbling slightly as she made her way over to me. She was drunk, not falling down drunk, but definitely past the point of good judgment. "Have you been having fun, honey?" "Just peachy," I said, steadying her with my hand. "Maybe we should think about heading home soon." "Home? The night is young." She turned to Andre, who had followed her over. "Andre, this is my husband, Dave. Dave, this is Andre. He's been telling me the most fascinating stories about Chicago." Andre extended his hand with the kind of confidence that made me want to break his fingers. "Nice to meet you, Dave. Sarah talks about you all the time." "I'll bet she does," I thought, shaking his hand and squeezing just a little harder than necessary. "All good things, I hope." "Of course. She says you're very good with your hands." His smile never wavered, but there was something in his eyes that made my blood pressure spike. "Dave owns a garage," Sarah said, her words slightly slurred. "He fixes things, cars mostly, sometimes other things that are broken." The way she said it made it sound like a character flaw. "That's honest work," Andre said. "I respect that. Not everyone can afford to chase their dreams. You know? Sometimes you have to be practical." The condescension was so thick I could taste it. This guy had been in town for a few months, drove a taxi for a living, and he was talking down to me like I was the hired help. "Well, we should probably get going," I said, taking Sarah's arm. "Early day tomorrow." "Oh, don't be such a party pooper," Sarah protested, pulling away from me. "Andre was just about to tell me about this amazing restaurant he knows in Chicago. Maybe we could all go sometime." All of us. Right. I could picture that dinner conversation. "Sounds great," I lied. "But seriously, we should go." Sarah pouted, but didn't argue further. We said our goodbyes, collected our coats, and made our way to the car. Sarah stumbled twice on the way, and I had to catch her both times. The drive home was quiet except for Sarah's occasional hiccups and the sound of my teeth grinding. I kept replaying the evening in my head. The way she danced with Andre, the grass stain on her dress, The look in Bob Peterson's eyes when he'd made his comment about Sarah being a good girl. We were almost home when Sarah broke the silence. "You were rude to Andre," she said, her words still slightly slurred. "Was I? I thought I was perfectly polite. You had that look, that jealous husband look. It's embarrassing." Embarrassing. There was that word again. Everything I did seemed to embarrass Sarah these days. My job, my clothes, my existence. Maybe I wouldn't have that look if my wife didn't spend the entire party grinding against some taxi driver she just met. Sarah's head snapped toward me, her eyes blazing with anger. Grinding? We were dancing, Dave. Dancing. Maybe if you ever asked me to dance instead of standing in the corner like a statue, you'd know the difference. Dancing doesn't usually involve grass stains on your dress. She looked down at her dress, noticing the stain for the first time. We went outside for some air. I sat on the patio chair. God, you're paranoid. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was reading too much into innocent flirtation. Maybe 15 years of marriage had made me suspicious of my own shadow. Or maybe my wife was lying to my face. We pulled into our driveway, and I eliminated the engine. Our house looked small and shabby compared to the Morrison mansion, with its peeling paint and overgrown lawn. Sarah sat in the passenger seat for a moment, staring at our front door like it was the entrance to a prison. "This isn't the life I wanted," she said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. 15 years of marriage, a son together, a lifetime of shared memories, and this wasn't the life she wanted. What's that supposed to mean? She turned to look at me, and for a moment, her mask slipped. I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Contempt. "Nothing," she said, getting out of the car. "Forget I said anything." But I wouldn't forget. Those words would replay in my head for hours, days, weeks to come. This isn't the life I wanted. As I watched her walk toward our front door, her heels clicking on the concrete, I wondered when exactly I'd stopped being her husband and started being her biggest disappointment. I had no idea that this was just the beginning. The next morning brought a hangover I didn't deserve and a wife who acted like nothing had happened. Sarah was up before me, already dressed in her power suit, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone like she was searching for the meaning of life in her Instagram feed. "Morning," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee that could strip paint. "Morning," she replied without looking up. "I'm working late tonight. Don't wait up." Working late, right. In the 15 years we'd been married, Sarah had never worked late on a Saturday. But then again, she'd never had a reason to before. Tommy shuffled into the kitchen wearing the uniform of teenage depression, sweatpants, oversized hoodie, and the kind of bedhead that suggested he'd been wrestling with his pillow all night. "Hey, kiddo," I said, ruffling his hair. "Want some breakfast?" "Not hungry," he mumbled, grabbing an energy drink from the fridge. "That's not breakfast, that's liquid diabetes." He shrugged and headed back toward his room. At 17, Tommy had perfected the art of nonverbal communication, expressing entire conversations through shoulder movements and heavy sighs. "Tommy," Sarah called after him, "remember what we talked about yesterday. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do." The basketball thing again. Sarah had been filling his head with ideas about following his passion and not being pressured by toxic masculinity ever since he'd mentioned wanting to quit the team. Never mind that his passion seemed to involve sleeping until noon and playing video games until his eyes bled. "Yeah, I know," Tommy said, disappearing upstairs. Sarah finished her coffee and grabbed her purse, checking her reflection in the hall mirror one more time. She looked good. Better than good, actually. She'd lost weight recently, started wearing makeup to work again, bought new clothes that showed off her figure. All the classic signs that I'd been too stupid to recognize. "See you tonight," she said, giving me a peck on the cheek that felt about as passionate as a handshake. "Sarah," I called after her as she reached the door. "Yeah?" I wanted to ask her about Andre, about the grass stain, about what she'd meant when she said this wasn't the life she wanted. But looking at her standing there in her designer clothes with her perfect makeup and her impatient expression, I lost my nerve. "Nothing? Have a good day." She left without another word, and I was alone with my coffee and my paranoid thoughts. I spent the morning at the shop trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of fixing broken things. There's something therapeutic about diagnosing a problem, taking apart an engine, and putting it back together better than it was before. If only marriages came with repair manuals. Around noon, my best friend Yuri stopped by with sandwiches and his trademark cynicism. Yuri Volkov was a former cop who'd traded his badge for a bartender's license after getting fed up with the politics of law enforcement. He was the kind of friend who'd help you move a body without asking questions, then spend the next 10 years making jokes about it. "You look like someone pissed in your cornflakes," he said, unwrapping a pastrami sandwich that could feed a small village. "Just tired," I lied. "Tired, my A. You've got that look." "What look?" "The look every married man gets when he realizes his wife is screwing around on him." I nearly choked on my sandwich. Jesus, Yuri. Way to sugarcoat it. "Hey, I'm just calling it like I see it. Sarah's been acting different lately. New clothes, new attitude, staying late at work. Either she's having an affair or she's joined a cult. And cults don't usually require push-up bras." The fact that Yuri had noticed the same things I had didn't make me feel any better. It just confirmed that I wasn't going crazy. Or maybe we both were. "She was dancing with some guy at a party last night," I admitted. "Taxi driver named Andre, fresh from Chicago." "Andre, huh? Sounds like a real winner. Let me guess. Tall, dark, and handsome, with the kind of accent that makes women's underwear drop? Something like that." Yuri took a massive bite of his sandwich and chewed thoughtfully. "You want my advice? Do I have a choice? Follow her." "What?" "Follow her, see where she goes, who she meets. You're never going to get the truth by asking nicely. Cheating wives don't just confess because you give them puppy dog eyes." The idea made my stomach turn. Following my own wife like some kind of private detective felt like admitting defeat, like acknowledging that our marriage was already over. "I can't do that." "Why not? She's obviously doing something she doesn't want you to know about. Don't you think you have a right to know what it is?" Before I could answer, the shop door chimed, and Bob Peterson walked in carrying what looked like a lawnmower engine that had been through a blender. Dave, just the man I wanted to see. Bob's grin was so wide it looked painful. "Got a little problem with my mower. Think you can work your magic?" "I can take a look," I said, grateful for the distraction. "What happened to it?" "Oh, you know how it is. These things just break down for no reason." He set the engine on my workbench and leaned against the counter like he was settling in for a long conversation. "Hell of a party last night, wasn't it?" Yuri raised an eyebrow and excused himself, probably sensing that Bob was about to deliver some gossip that would ruin my day. "Yeah, it was nice," I said, focusing on the engine. "Sarah sure seemed to be having a good time. That Andre fellow is quite the charmer, isn't he?" There it was. Bob couldn't just drop off his broken lawnmower and leave. He had to poke at the wound to see how much blood he could draw. I guess. "You know, I saw them out on the patio for quite a while. Must have been having quite the conversation." Bob's voice took on that fake innocent tone that people use when they're being anything but innocent. I looked up from the engine, meeting his eyes directly. "What exactly are you trying to say, Bob?" "Nothing. Nothing at all. Just making conversation. You know how people talk in a small town. Probably nothing to it." But his grin said otherwise. His grin said he knew exactly what he was doing, and he was enjoying every second of it. "How much do I owe you for fixing this?" Bob asked, suddenly all business. $50 should cover it. I'll have it ready by Monday." "Great. I'll tell Martha you said hi." He headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Dave? If you ever need to talk, you know where to find me. Sometimes it helps to have someone to listen." After he left, I stared at the broken engine for a long time, wondering if it was a metaphor for my marriage. Some things could be fixed with the right tools and enough patience. Others were just too far gone to save. That evening, I sat in my living room pretending to watch television while actually watching the clock. Sarah had said she was working late, but it was already 8 o'clock, and the offices at Morrison Industries closed at 5. Tommy came downstairs around 9, looking slightly more human than he had that morning. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure, kiddo. What's on your mind?" He sat down on the couch next to me, fidgeting with his phone. "Do you think Mom's happy?" The question hit me like a sucker punch. How do you tell your 17-year-old son that you're not sure his mother wants to be married to his father anymore? What makes you ask that? "I don't know. She just seems different lately. Angrier, like she's mad at the world or something. Your mom's under a lot of pressure at work. Sometimes adults get stressed and take it out on the people they love." Tommy nodded, but he didn't look convinced. "She keeps telling me I should quit basketball. Says I shouldn't do things just to make other people happy." "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. I used to love playing, but now it just feels like work. Like everyone's watching me, waiting for me to screw up." I put my arm around his shoulders, feeling the weight of his confusion and my own. You don't have to decide anything right now. Take some time, figure out what makes you happy. What if I don't know what makes me happy? Then you're just like the rest of us, kiddo. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching some mindless sitcom and pretending our family wasn't falling apart. Around 10:30, we heard Sarah's car in the driveway. She came through the front door looking slightly disheveled, her hair mussed and her lipstick gone. Again. "Sorry I'm so late," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Big project at work. You know how it is." "Sure," I said. "Long day?" She headed upstairs without another word, and I heard the shower running a few minutes later. When she finally came to bed an hour later, she smelled like soap and shampoo, but underneath it all was something else. Something that made my chest tighten with suspicion and dread. I lay awake most of that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to Sarah breathe beside me. She slept peacefully, like someone without a care in the world, like someone who'd gotten exactly what she wanted. And for the first time in 15 years of marriage, I started to hate her for it. Sunday morning brought rain and the kind of gray sky that matched my mood perfectly. Sarah slept in until almost noon, which was unusual for someone who usually treated weekends like military operations. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, she was already dressed and checking her phone. "I'm meeting Lena for lunch," she announced. "Girl talk. You know how it is." I knew how it was, all right. Girl talk was code for planning her next move, and Lena was the perfect accomplice. Smart, sneaky, and completely without conscience. "Want me to come along?" I asked, knowing she'd say no, but wanting to see her reaction. "Oh, you'd be bored to death. We're just going to talk about work stuff and gossip about people you don't know." She grabbed her purse and keys. "I'll be back later." After she left, I found myself standing in our kitchen, holding a cup of coffee and staring at nothing. The house felt empty, like a museum of a life that used to exist. Family photos on the refrigerator showed happier times. Vacations, birthdays, Tommy's basketball games. When had we stopped looking happy together? My phone buzzed with a text from Yuri. "Beer and wisdom at Murphy's. Your treat." Murphy's Bar was the kind of place where dreams went to die dim lighting, sticky floors, and a clientele that had given up on life but hadn't quite figured out how to stop living it. Yuri was already there when I arrived, holding court at the end of the bar with a whiskey that looked like it could power a small aircraft. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Thanks. You really know how to make a guy feel special." "Sarah still working late?" "Lunch with Lena today. Girl talk." Yuri snorted. "Girl talk. Right. And I'm the Pope." He signaled the bartender for another round. "You follow her yet?" "No. Why not?" "Because I'm not ready to know the truth, buddy. The truth doesn't care if you're ready. It just is. And the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be." I knew he was right, but knowing and accepting are two different things. Following your wife feels like crossing a line you can't uncross, like admitting that everything you thought you knew about your life was a lie. "Tell me about this Andre guy," Yuri said. "What's his story?" "Taxi driver, new in town. Apparently quite the charmer." "Taxi driver, huh? Let me make a few calls." Yuri pulled out his phone. "I still have friends on the force. Might be interesting to see what Mr. Charming's background looks like." While Yuri worked his contacts, I nursed my beer and watched the football game on the bar's ancient television. The Packers were losing, which seemed appropriate. Everything in my life was losing lately. "Interesting," Yuri said, hanging up his phone. "Your boy Andre has quite the resume. 2 arrests for domestic violence in Chicago, both charges dropped. Restraining order filed by an ex-girlfriend last year. And get this, he's been asking around town about the Morrison Industries crowd, specifically about which ladies might be looking for a little excitement." The beer turned to acid in my stomach. He's targeting married women? Looks that way. Classic hunter behavior. Find vulnerable women, sweep them off their feet, then see what he can get out of them. Money, connections, whatever. Sarah's not vulnerable. Yuri gave me a look that could have melted steel. "Dave, every married woman is vulnerable to the right line of BS, especially when she's unhappy at home." The truth of that statement hit me like a physical blow. Sarah was unhappy. She'd said so herself. This isn't the life I wanted. And now some smooth-talking hunter was offering her something different, something exciting, something that didn't involve being married to a mechanic who embarrassed her at parties. "I need to get home," I said, throwing money on the bar. "Dave, wait. Don't do anything stupid." But I was already heading for the door. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray and threatening. I drove home with my mind racing, trying to figure out what to say to Sarah, how to confront her without sounding like a paranoid lunatic. The house was still empty when I got there. Sarah's lunch with Lena was stretching into the evening, which wasn't unusual for them but felt suspicious under the circumstances. I found myself wandering through our house like a detective at a crime scene, looking for clues I'd missed. In our bedroom, I noticed that Sarah had rearranged her dresser. New perfume, expensive makeup, lingerie I'd never seen before. In the bathroom, there were birth control pills I didn't remember her taking. We'd been trying to have another baby for months, or at least I thought we had. The pills were the smoking gun I didn't want to find. Sarah had been lying about wanting another child, lying about trying to get pregnant, lying about everything that mattered. I was sitting on our bed, holding the pill pack and feeling like my world was collapsing, when I heard Tommy come through the front door. "Dad? You home?" I shoved the pills back in the drawer and went downstairs. Tommy was in the kitchen, raiding the refrigerator with the single-minded determination of a teenage boy. "Where's Mom?" he asked around a mouthful of leftover pizza. "Still out with Lena. They've been hanging out a lot lately." Tommy's tone was casual, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he'd noticed more than he was letting on. "Yeah, they have." "Dad, can I tell you something?" "Of course." Tommy set down his pizza and looked at me directly, which was unusual for him. "I heard Mom on the phone the other night. She was talking to someone and she was laughing in this weird way, like flirty laughing. And then she saw me and got really mad, told me to mind my own business." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "When was this?" "Few nights ago, after you went to bed. I got up to get some water and she was downstairs on her phone. She seemed really happy, happier than I've seen her in a long time." My 17-year-old son had figured out what I'd been too blind to see. Sarah was having an affair, and she wasn't even trying very hard to hide it anymore. "Tommy, listen to me. Whatever's going on with your mom and me, it's not your fault, okay? Sometimes adults make mistakes, and sometimes marriages don't work out the way people hope they will." Tommy nodded, but his eyes were bright with tears he was trying not to shed. "Are you guys getting divorced?" "I don't know, kiddo. I honestly don't know." We stood there in our kitchen, father and son, both of us trying to process the fact that our family was falling apart in real time. I wanted to protect him from this, to shield him from the ugly reality of adult relationships, but it was too late for that. He'd already seen too much. Sarah came home around 9 o'clock, looking flushed and happy in a way that made me want to break something. She was humming under her breath, checking her phone every few seconds, acting like a teenager with her first crush. "How was lunch?" I asked. "Oh, you know Lena. She always has the best gossip." Sarah kicked off her heels and headed for the stairs. "I'm exhausted. Think I'll take a bath and go to bed early." She disappeared upstairs and I heard the bathroom door close, followed by the sound of running water. A few minutes later, I heard her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter where she'd left it. The text was from someone named A, and it was short and sweet. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. This wasn't just flirtation anymore. This was a full-blown affair, and my wife wasn't even trying to hide it. I deleted the message and put the phone back where I'd found it. Then I went to my garage, poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey, and started planning my next move. If Sarah wanted to play games, I was ready to play, but she wasn't going to like the rules. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Sarah was up early, singing in the shower and taking extra care with her appearance. She'd chosen a red dress that hugged every curve and heels that added 3 inches to her height and 10 years to my blood pressure. "Big day at work?" I asked, knowing the answer. "Just want to look professional," she said. But the way she checked herself in the mirror suggested she was dressing for an audience of 1. After she left, I called Yuri. "I need a favor," I said. "Name it. I need you to follow Sarah today. See where she goes, who she meets." "About damn time. I'll call you when I have something." I spent the morning at the shop, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. Every time my phone rang, my heart jumped. Around noon, Yuri finally called. "Bingo," he said. "Your wife just went into the Riverside Motel with your taxi driver friend. Room 237. They looked real cozy." The Riverside Motel was exactly the kind of place you'd expect for a sleazy affair. Cheap, anonymous, and far enough from downtown that you probably wouldn't run into anyone you knew. The fact that Sarah was willing to meet Andre in such a dump told me everything I needed to know about how far she'd fallen. "How long have they been in there?" About 20 minutes. You want me to keep watching? No, I'll take it from here. I closed the shop early and drove to the motel, my hands shaking with rage and adrenaline. Sarah's car was parked in the back, partially hidden behind a dumpster like she was ashamed of what she was doing. Good. She should be ashamed. I sat in my truck for almost an hour, watching room 237 and trying to decide what to do. I could burst in and catch them in the act, but that felt too much like a bad soap opera. I could wait for them to come out and confront them in the parking lot, but that was too public. Or I could do nothing, go home, and pretend I'd never seen anything. The decision was made for me when the door to room 237 opened and Sarah emerged, followed by Andre. They were laughing about something, and Sarah looked happier than I'd seen her in years. Andre said something that made her throw her head back and laugh even harder. Then he pulled her close and kissed her like they were teenagers. I took pictures with my phone, my hands steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. Evidence. I was going to need evidence. They separated, and Sarah headed for her car while Andre went to his taxi. I waited until Sarah was gone, then got out of my truck and walked over to where Andre was checking his phone. Andre, right? I said. He looked up, and I saw recognition flash in his eyes, followed quickly by something that might have been fear. Dave, what are you doing here? Funny, I was about to ask you the same question. He straightened up, trying to look confident, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead. Just dropping off a fare. You know how it is. Yeah, I know exactly how it is. I stepped closer, close enough that he had to tilt his head back to look at me. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to delete her number from your phone. And if I ever see you within 50 feet of her again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. Look, man, I don't know what you think you saw. I saw my wife coming out of that motel room with you. I saw you kiss her. I took pictures. So let's skip the part where you pretend this is all innocent, okay? Andre's fake confidence crumbled. She told me you guys were separated. Did she? What else did she tell you? That you were controlling, that you didn't understand her, that she was planning to leave you anyway. Each word was like a knife between my ribs. Sarah had been painting me as the villain in her story, making herself the sufferer who deserved sympathy and comfort. It was a classic cheater's playbook, and Andre had fallen for it completely. Well, here's something she didn't tell you, I said. I'm not going anywhere. This is my town, my family, my life. And you're just some loser taxi driver who thought he could waltz in here and break up a marriage for fun. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. You're a hunter, Andre. I know about Chicago, about the arrests, about the restraining order. You make a habit of this, don't you? Find lonely married women, feed them a line of BS, see what you can get out of them. His face went pale. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. The question is, what am I going to do about it? I let that hang in the air for a moment, watching him squirm. Then I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to disappear. Leave town, find a new hunting ground, whatever. But you're going to stay away from my wife and my family. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you are. And in a small town like this, reputation is everything. You can't. I can, and I will. I've got friends, Andre. Friends who don't like it when outsiders come into their town and mess with their neighbors' families. Friends who might decide to pay you a visit one dark night. It was a bluff mostly, but Andre didn't know that. He was from Chicago, where threats like that might be backed up with action. In our little Midwestern town, we were more likely to passive-aggressively exclude someone from the church potluck, but he didn't need to know that. Think about it, I said, turning to walk away. But don't think too long. My patience isn't what it used to be. I drove home feeling like I'd accomplished something, but the victory was hollow. I'd scared off Andre, but that didn't solve the real problem. The real problem was that my wife had chosen to have an affair in the first place. Andre was just the symptom. Sarah was the disease. That evening, Sarah came home acting like nothing had happened. She was in a good mood, humming while she cooked dinner, asking about my day like she actually cared about the answer. The performance was almost perfect, except for the occasional glance at her phone and the way she jumped every time it buzzed. Everything okay? I asked during dinner. You seem a little jumpy. Just tired, she said. Long day at work. Yeah, I'll bet. Something in my tone must have caught her attention because she looked at me sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, just agreeing with you. We finished dinner in silence, and Sarah excused herself to take a phone call. I heard her go upstairs, heard her bedroom door close, heard her voice, but not her words. When she came back down 20 minutes later, she looked upset. Problem at work? I asked. Something like that. I was willing to bet that Andre had told her about our little conversation. Good. Let her sweat for a while. Let her wonder what I knew and what I was planning to do about it. That night, as we lay in bed pretending to sleep, I could feel the tension radiating from Sarah like heat from a furnace. She kept shifting, checking her phone, sighing dramatically. Around midnight, she got up and went to the bathroom, and I heard her making another phone call. This time, I got up and listened at the door. "I don't care what he said," Sarah was whispering. "He doesn't scare me. We just have to be more careful for a while." A pause. "No, I'm not ending this. I can't go back to pretending everything is fine when it's not. I won't live like that anymore." Another pause. "I know it's complicated, but we'll figure it out. We just need to be patient." I went back to bed before she finished her call, but I'd heard enough. Sarah wasn't backing down. If anything, my confrontation with Andre had made her more determined to continue the affair. She was choosing him over me, choosing excitement over stability, choosing a fantasy over reality. Fine. If that's how she wanted to play it, I was ready to raise the stakes. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The law office of Patricia Chen was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town attorney. Wood paneling, leather chairs, and the kind of diplomas on the wall that were meant to impress clients and intimidate opponents. Patricia herself was a sharp-dressed woman in her 50s, with the kind of smile that could cut glass and eyes that missed nothing. "So," she said, reviewing the photos I'd printed out, "your wife is having an affair with this Andre character, and you want to know your options." "That's right. How long has this been going on?" "I'm not sure. I only found out about it recently, but looking back, there were signs. She's been different for months." Patricia nodded, making notes on a legal pad. "Any joint assets? Property, investments, business interests? The house, our cars, my auto shop? Nothing too complicated." "Children? One son, 17 years old." "Good. At his age, the court will take his preferences into account regarding custody." She leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to be straight with you. If infidelity doesn't carry the same legal weight it used to, courts are more interested in equitable division of assets and the best interests of the child than in punishing cheating spouses. So she gets away with it? Legally, yes. But that doesn't mean you don't have options." Patricia's smile turned carnivory. "Tell me about your wife's job, her social circle, her reputation in the community." I told her about Sarah's position at Morrison Industries, her ambitions, her carefully cultivated image as the perfect corporate wife. Patricia listened with growing interest. "Reputation matters in a small town," she said, "and it matters even more in corporate environments. If word got out about her affair, especially with someone like this Andre character, it could seriously damage her career prospects." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply observing that information has a way of spreading in communities like ours. Sometimes that works in our favor, sometimes it doesn't." I understood. Patricia couldn't tell me to destroy my wife's reputation, but she could point me in the right direction and let me draw my own conclusions. "There's something else," I said. "I found birth control pills in her dresser. We've been supposedly trying for another baby." Patricia's eyebrows went up. "That suggests premeditation. She's been planning this affair, taking steps to avoid consequences. That might be useful in custody proceedings." I left the lawyer's office with a strategy and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in weeks. Sarah wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that I knew how to play too. My first stop was Murphy's Bar, where Yuri was already holding court with a group of local guys I recognized from high school. Word travels fast in a small town, and I was counting on that. "Dave," Yuri called out when he saw me. "Boys, you remember Dave Morrison, owns the auto shop on 5th Street? There were nods and handshakes all around. These were working-class guys, construction workers, factory employees, truck drivers, the kind of men who understood loyalty and didn't have much patience for cheating wives. "Heard you're having some trouble at home," said Mike Kowalski, Lena's husband. "Sorry to hear that, man." "Yeah, well, you know how it is. Sometimes you marry someone thinking you know them, and then you find out they're not who you thought they were." That taxi driver still sniffing around? Asked Tom Bradley, who worked at the grain elevator. Far as I know, some guys just don't understand the concept of respect. The conversation flowed naturally from there. I didn't have to say much, just enough to plant seeds, to let these guys know that Sarah was cheating, and that Andre was the kind of outsider who didn't respect local customs. By the time I left, I was confident that the story would spread through town like wildfire. My next stop was the Morrison Industries office building. I didn't go inside. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I parked across the street and waited. Around noon, I saw Sarah and Lena leave together, heading for their usual lunch spot. I waited another 10 minutes, then walked into the building and took the elevator to the third floor, where Sarah worked. The receptionist was a young woman named Jennifer who'd gone to high school with Tommy. "Hi, Mr. Morrison. How are you?" "I'm fine, Jennifer. Is my wife around? I wanted to surprise her with lunch." "Oh, she just left with Lena, but you could wait in her office if you want." "That's okay. I'll catch her later." I paused as if something had just occurred to me. I've been meaning to ask, has Sarah been working a lot of late hours recently? She's been coming home exhausted. Jennifer looked uncomfortable. I don't really keep track of everyone's schedules." "Of course not. It's just that she mentioned working on some big project with that new guy, the taxi driver. What's his name again?" I don't think I know who you mean." But her face told a different story. Jennifer knew exactly who I meant, which confirmed that Sarah's affair was becoming common knowledge around the office. Perfect. "Well, anyway," I said, "if you see her, tell her I stopped by." I left the building knowing that Jennifer would be on the phone with her friends within 5 minutes, spreading the news that Dave Morrison had come looking for his wife and asking about her relationship with some taxi driver. By the end of the day, half the company would know that Sarah Morrison was having an affair. That evening, Sarah came home looking stressed. She kept checking her phone, and I could see the worry lines around her eyes getting deeper. "Rough day?" I asked. "You could say that." She poured herself a glass of wine, a large one. "People can be so petty sometimes." "What do you mean?" "Oh, just office gossip. You know how it is." I knew exactly how it was. The gossip mill was working overtime, and Sarah was feeling the heat. Good. Anything I can do to help? She looked at me suspiciously, as if trying to figure out whether I was being sincere or sarcastic. "No, it's fine. I can handle it." "I'm sure you can. You've always been good at handling difficult situations." The double meaning wasn't lost on her. Sarah set down her wine glass and studied my face. "Dave, is there something you want to say to me?" "Not particularly. Why?" "You've been acting strange lately. Different." "Different how?" "I don't know, like you're planning something." I smiled, and I could see it made her nervous. What would I be planning? "I have no idea. That's what worries me." We stared at each other across our kitchen table, husband and wife, locked in a battle of wills that neither of us was willing to acknowledge openly. Sarah blinked first. "I'm going to take a bath," she said. "Enjoy yourself." After she went upstairs, I sat in my living room and called Tommy's coach. "Coach Williams, this is Dave Morrison, Tommy's dad. Hey, Dave, how's it going?" "Not great, to be honest. Sarah and I are having some problems, and I think it's affecting Tommy. He's been talking about quitting the team. Yeah, I noticed he's been distracted lately. Anything I can do to help?" "Just keep an eye on him. Make sure he knows he's got support. This whole situation with his mother, it's been hard on him." "Situation with his mother?" I let that hang in the air for a moment. "I probably shouldn't say anything, but Sarah's been having some personal issues, making some bad choices. I'm trying to shield Tommy from it as much as possible." "I understand. Don't worry about Tommy. We'll take care of him." "Thanks, Coach. I appreciate it." Another seed planted. By tomorrow, the story would be all over the school. Sarah Morrison was having problems, making bad choices, putting her family at risk. The details would fill themselves in through speculation and gossip. When Sarah came downstairs an hour later, her phone was buzzing constantly. She kept declining calls, but they kept coming. "Popular tonight," I observed. "Just work stuff." But I could see the panic in her eyes. Her carefully constructed world was starting to crumble, and she didn't know how to stop it. Around 10 o'clock, there was a knock at our front door. Sarah jumped like she'd been electrocuted. "I'll get it," I said. It was Andre looking desperate and angry. "I need to talk to Sarah. She's not available." "Look, man, I don't know what you've been telling people, but I haven't been telling people anything. I don't need to. The truth has a way of coming out on its own." Sarah appeared behind me, her face pale. "Andre, you shouldn't be here. We need to talk. People are saying things, making accusations. My dispatcher got 3 calls today asking if we do background checks on our drivers. That's terrible, I said, not bothering to hide my smile. Small towns can be so judgmental. Andre looked at me with pure hatred. You did this. I didn't do anything. I'm just a mechanic who fixes broken things. Speaking of which, you might want to get your taxi checked. I heard someone saw it parked at the Riverside Motel for hours at a time. That kind of thing can hurt your reputation with the taxi company. Sarah grabbed Andre's arm. You need to go. Now. Sarah. Go? He left, but not before giving me a look that promised this wasn't over. I was counting on that. This has to stop, Sarah said after I closed the door. What has to stop? Whatever you're doing, the rumors, the gossip, the maltreatment. I'm not doing anything, Sarah. I'm just living my life. Same as always. Bees, you're trying to destroy me. Why would I want to destroy you? You're my wife, the mother of my child. Because you know. There it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. Know what? About Andre. About us. Us? I let the word hang in the air like a bad smell. There is no us, Sarah. There's you, and there's your taxi driver, and there's the mess you've made of our family. Tears started running down her face, but I felt no sympathy. She'd made her choices. Now she had to live with the consequences. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she said. How was it supposed to happen? You were going to leave me for a taxi driver with a criminal record? You were going to destroy our son's family for some sleazy affair? You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're bored with your life, so you decided to blow it up. Well, congratulations. Mission accomplished. Sarah collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, and now everyone knows what kind of person you really are. What happens now? I sat down across from her, studying her tear-streaked face. A week ago, I would have felt sorry for her. Now I just felt cold. Now you make a choice, I said. You can end this thing with Andre. We can go to counseling, and maybe we can salvage something from this marriage. Or you can keep playing games, and I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly who Sarah Morrison really is. That's blackmail. That's consequences. Something you've managed to avoid most of your life. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. What happened to you? You used to be kind. I used to be naive. You cured me of that. The next morning, Sarah was gone when I woke up. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and most of her clothes were missing from the closet. She'd left a note on the kitchen table. I need time to think. Don't try to find me. But I already knew where she was. The Riverside Motel, room 237, with her taxi driver boyfriend, running away instead of facing the consequences of her actions. Fine, let her run. It would just make the divorce easier. I called Patricia Chen and told her what had happened. Perfect, she said. Abandonment of the marital home, infidelity, putting her child at risk. We'll have no trouble getting you full custody and a favorable property settlement. How long will this take? A few months, maybe less, if she doesn't contest it. But given the circumstances, I doubt she'll want this to go to trial. Too much dirty laundry. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and thinking about the last 15 years. Sarah was right about one thing. I had changed. The man who'd married her would never have orchestrated the systematic destruction of her reputation. That man had been trusting, forgiving, willing to see the best in people. But that man was gone, eliminated by betrayal and replaced by someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Sarah had wanted excitement, had wanted to see what would happen if she pushed me too far. Now she knew. Tommy came downstairs around noon, looking confused and hurt. Where's Mom? She's gone, kiddo. She left this morning. Is she coming back? I don't know. Maybe, but things are going to be different now. Tommy nodded, trying to process this new reality. Dad, are you okay? I looked at my son, tall, strong, decent in ways his mother had never been, and felt something inside me ease just slightly. Yeah, kiddo. I think I'm going to be just fine. That afternoon, I reopened the shop and got back to work. Cars don't fix themselves and life goes on, even after your world falls apart. Around 3 o'clock, Yuri stopped by with coffee and his usual commentary. Heard Sarah took off, he said. News travels fast. Fastest thing in this town. So what's the plan now? Divorce. Full custody. Start over. Think she'll fight it? I thought about Sarah. holed up in a cheap motel with a taxi driver who was probably already planning his exit strategy. No, she's got nothing to fight with. What about the taxi driver? What about him? He got what he wanted, a married woman willing to throw away her life for a few hours of excitement. Now he's stuck with her. Yuri laughed. You know, for a guy whose wife just left him, you seem pretty calm. I'm not calm, I'm free. And for the first time in months, that was actually true. 2 weeks later, I got the call I'd been expecting. Sarah wanted to talk, wanted to work things out, wanted to come home. But it was too late for that. The papers had already been filed, the custody hearing scheduled, the property division negotiated. I made a mistake, she said over the phone, her voice small and broken. Yes, you did. Can't we try again for Tommy's sake? Tommy's fine. He's better off without the constant fighting and tension. Kids are resilient. I love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of security, of having someone to fall back on when your exciting new life doesn't work out the way you planned. That's not true. It doesn't matter anymore, Sarah. It's over. She started crying then, the kind of desperate sobs that might have moved me once upon a time. But I'd learned to recognize manipulation when I heard it. And I'd learned that some things, once broken, can't be fixed. What about Andre? I asked. He left. Took a job in Detroit. Said he couldn't handle the pressure. Of course he did. Hunters don't stick around when their sufferers become liabilities. So you're alone? Yes. Good. Now you know how it feels. I hung up and went back to work. There was a transmission that needed rebuilding, and unlike marriages, transmissions could be fixed if you had the right tools and enough patience. 6 months later, the divorce was final. I got the house, full custody of Tommy, and most of our assets. Sarah got a small settlement and a hard lesson in consequences. She'd moved back to her mother's house in another state, taken a job with a company that didn't know about her reputation, started over with nothing. Tommy was doing better. He'd decided to stay on the basketball team after all, and his grades had improved once the tension at home disappeared. He spent weekends with Sarah sometimes, but he always seemed relieved to come home. Dad, he said one evening while we were watching a game on TV, I'm glad you didn't let her come back. Why's that? Because you deserve better. We both do. Smart kid. Smarter than his old man had been anyway. I never saw Andre again, but I heard through the grapevine that he'd had trouble finding work in Detroit. Seems his reputation had followed him there thanks to some phone calls from concerned citizens who wanted to make sure other communities knew what kind of man they were dealing with. As for Lena, she'd been fired from Morrison Industries after someone anonymously provided evidence of her role in facilitating Sarah's affair. She'd moved away too, unable to find work in a town where everyone knew she couldn't be trusted. The house felt bigger with just Tommy and me, but it also felt cleaner somehow, like we'd finally gotten rid of something toxic that had been poisoning the air for years. I was in my garage one evening, working on a classic Mustang that someone wanted restored, when my phone rang. It was Sarah. Dave, I just wanted to call and say I'm sorry for everything. Okay. I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I needed you to know that I regret what I did. You were a good husband, and I threw it all away for nothing. You're right, I was a good husband. Past tense. I deserve that. Yes, you do. There was a long pause. Are you happy now? I thought about it. Was I happy? I was free. I was respected in my community. I had my son's love and trust. And I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. Maybe that was better than happy. I'm content, I said finally. Good. You deserve to be content. After she hung up, I went back to work on the Mustang. It was a beautiful car, classic lines, and powerful engine. But it had been neglected for years. The previous owner had let it rust and decay, thinking it would always be there when he was ready to appreciate it. But with enough time, effort, and the right tools, even the most damaged things could be restored to something better than they'd ever been before. I was living proof of that.